The first image, known as the Bahram Gur fights the Karg, comes from the Shahama, or Persian Book of Kings. It dates back to 14th century when artists of the Mongol court in Persia, present-day Iran, most likely in a court workshop, used gold and silver accents over ink and opaque watercolors to paint the image. Book illustrations such as this one thrived and became a major art form for both religious and secular text under the Mongol Empire and ruler Hulagu. Since the Mongols were a nomadic people, artworks tended to be small and portable, which is why the Shahama exists. In this particular image, Bahram Fights the Karg depicts a brave story of a Persian king, Bahram Gur, who single-handedly defeated the Karg, a monstrous horned wolf. Bahram Gur was the king of the Sasanian Empire that ruled Persia from the 3rd to 7th century, just before the arrival of Islam and the defeat of the Mongol Empire. Many scholars also believe that the new Mongol rule wanted to link themselves to great heroes and kings of Persia's past, which is why they chose Bahram Gur to symbolize the rule in civilized society, triumphing over chaos and disorder, which would be represented through the Karg. In this image, Bahram Gur is seen standing over the slain Karg with his weaponry and elegant dress. Persia at this time had a long artistic tradition of depicting heroes, kings, and other warriors as standing over their slain opponents. This is why Bahram Gur is depicted in this manner. Although he is depicted as wearing elegant garments which would symbolize his nobility, he is still seen as a warrior as he is holding the weaponry that would have slain the Karg. It also seems as though Bahram Gur is bursting out of the frame of the portrait. Overall, this image of Bahram Gur fighting the Karg goes along with the theme of the Shahama, which is filled with stories that teach the importance of courage and ethics while traveling throughout a threatening world. Similar to the last image, the Court of Gayumars comes from an illuminated manuscript of the Shahama, also known as the Book of Kings. This manuscript would have been written around the year 1000 and contains epic chronicles of kings and heroes who predate the introduction of Islam to Persia. This particular manuscript of the Shahama began under the early 16th century for the first Safavid dynastic ruler, Shah Ismail. It would have been completed under the direction of his son, Shah Tahmasp I in Tabriz. In its entirety, the manuscript would have consisted of 759 illustrated folios and 258 miniatures. This particular miniature is attributed to the workshop of Sultan Muhammad. In 1568, this lavish painting would have been given to the Ottoman Sultan Selim II as a gift from the empire. This image is organized on a vertical axis with the mountains behind the king in the distance and the garden below him in the foreground. The king, also known as King Gayumars, was the first king of Persia. He is seated cross-legged as if levitating above the mountains in the landscape. At the base of the painting, there are followers of the king who are gathered around. He is seen rising above them. The two other figures seen perched on the cliffs beside the king are his son, who is on the left side of the painting, seen standing, and his grandson, who is on the right, seated. This would have symbolized the authority of not only King Gayumars, but also his entire family, such as his son and grandson. In addition to the painting on the manuscript, there is also calligraphic text, and we can see parallels between the image and text, although not common in all manuscripts. The next piece is Ryoanji, which is a Zen Buddhist temple located in Kyoto, Japan. Although the exact dating of the garden is unknown, it is originally created in 15th century and that its present-day design dates from the Edo period, around 1650 to 1868. In addition to the unknown dating on the background, the creators of the garden are also unknown. It is widely debated that Matsumoto, the chief patron of the garden, was in charge of the design. However, stones have been inscribed with two names. These names, Koarto and Hichikuro, who were known river workers belonging to the lower social classes, may have been linked to the garden. Despite the many unknowns of the background, It has been a symbol of both Zen Buddhism and Japanese culture for many years. Zen Buddhism is a branch of Buddhism where followers pursue an enlightenment or awakening by means of self-introspection and personal experience throughout their daily lives, which is why the garden would have been an essential part of this journey. The garden may have been inspired by aspects of both Japanese and Chinese culture, as Zen Buddhism was derived from Chan Buddhism in China, which emphasizes meditation. It is because of these many influences that Ryoanji Garden is one of the most famous examples of a rock garden to this day. It consists of rocks and pebbles rather than vegetation and water. The white gravel of the garden represents the flowing elements such as waterfalls or rivers, and the rocks represent island shores and bridges. The Ryoanji Garden presents stones surrounded by raked white gravel with minimum use of plants. Altogether, there are 15 rocks of different sizes arranged in pebbles covering a 250-meter rectangle of ground. Since the original date of its creation in the 15th century, there have been numerous changes made to the garden. For example, the garden originally had 9 big stones, thought to represent the tiger cubs crossing the water. However, in the present-day garden, there are 15 stones. The rock garden is located south of the Hojo, which is the main building used for the abbot's personal study and living quarters of the temple. In addition to the garden, there are several important aspects of the temple, such as the mirror pond, a small west garden, and a rear garden with tea houses. This is a map of what the temple and grounds of Ryoanji look like. The final image is of Jahangir preferring a Sufi sheikh to the kings. This image comes from the St. Petersburg album and dates to 1615 to 1618. The artist Bektir, who is credited with creating this image, would have used opaque watercolor, gold, and ink on paper to create the image. There's an interesting background behind this image. Akbar, the third emperor of the Mughal dynasty, is known for consulting with a Sufi or Islamic mystic known as Sheikh Salim, who assured him that there would be an heir to the throne. However, the emperor did not believe him. When the Emperor Akbar's son was born, he named him after the sheikh he had consulted with, Prince Salim. Later on, Prince Salim gave himself the name Jahangir, meaning Caesar of the world. In this image, Prince Salim, also known as Jahangir, is the largest image of the 5 figures painted. He is shown seated on an elevated platform and is facing 4 bearded men of varying ethnicity who are standing in a receiving line. The first man in this receiving line is the Sufi sheikh, who accepts the gift of the book that the emperor is giving to him. The second man in the hierarchical order is the Ottoman Sultan, as he is wearing a turban in typical Ottoman clothing. The third in line is King James I of England. This can be known because of his European attire. Last in line is the artist, Bektir, who is responsible for the miniature. Based on his attire, we know he is a Hindu at service of the Mughal court, a reminder that artists who create an Islamic art are not always Muslim. In this image, Jahangir is making a statement about his spiritual leanings because he is only engaging with the sheikh, rather than the other kings. Inscriptions on the top and bottom of the folios also demonstrate that the emperor favors a holy man over the kings,